ready whenever you're ready.
Welcome to warm, sunny Switzerland, the home of the Cardano Foundation. It is a special day for me today. Today I have the honor of speaking to you, dear audience, dear community members, dear builders, dear Cardano lovers. Today we're going to speak about the strategy. But much more the strategy, we're going to speak about also how we implement that strategy and how our roadmap is looking in the next months and years to come. To bring a bit of structure into the next half an hour or so, I would like to introduce the agenda. We will ensure there will be some nice timestamps so you can get to the right part and what you find mostly interesting. So the first part we're going to talk about is what mission do we have? The second part will be about how does that translate into short and long-term goals. We will then touch about what does that mean from a strategy and strategy implementation perspective, our positioning in the space of the Trinity, our general strategic principles, how we interact with you, our dear community, and our future community, how we are enhancing the team to make all of this happen, and last but not least, where do you go if you have questions or comments going forward? You might have heard of the quote, "The future is already here. It is just unevenly distributed." We are right now in the Goguen era, and I'm proud to say that the future is already here. We have the native tokens. It is possible for enterprises and individuals to build businesses, to optimize business models on the Cardano stack. Now, our mission as the Cardano Foundation is that we want to augment and ensure that Cardano becomes the future financial and social operating system for generations to come. What does that really mean? It means that we are providing guidance, oversight, and supervision for the Cardano ecosystem post the initial development. We think that Cardano is really the best option to ensure this inclusivity, to ensure that even the 2 billion people who don't have access to this kind of technology and this kind of infrastructure get access to this. It is not built for 10,000 or 100,000 people. It is really built for the masses. And inclusion is important. Therefore, adoption and the road to adoption is also important. Secondly, legislation and legislative standards. There is a lot of uncertainty of what does it mean to have a decentralized, permissionless blockchain. What can we do with it? Where is the legislation? Where are the standards? Where are the boundary conditions? Therefore, these are one of the topics we want to dig very much into. But nothing happens without the community. The community is what drives us, it's what guides us, it's why we are doing it. It's not just about building a large community, but it's about having an impactful community who can take over again and again as time progresses around decentralization and guiding our road forward. With that comes also governance and stakeholder accountability. In any large decentralized project, we see there is a progression as the maturity goes along. To start with, it comes with a few brains, maybe an incorporation, a funding round, and it then moves along. We don't know exactly how the end result is going to be from an operational perspective, but we do see it in the eyes of the people we meet. We do see the need for change, the need for changing the status quo to a much larger infrastructure where everybody can interoperate, where everybody can talk together, and where we all can come together to decide about the large problems ahead of us and how to solve those. Therefore, this stakeholder accountability and governance become not just one of the largest value propositions for us, but also becomes the road for adoption and the road for success. The Cardano Foundation will look into how we increase the stakeholder accountability, and we will take upon accountability of many of the things which we cannot give to the community just yet. But rest assured, it is not our role to take all of the accountability and be a centralized pawn in a large decentralized ecosystem. Last but not least, partnerships. As they sometimes say, you cannot travel alone. You need partners. You need people and companies and governments and organizations and DAOs who can help augment also what the Cardano Foundation stands for and around how we bring this beautiful technology out to the masses and how we can create that impact we really see the world is craving for. Now, that being said, every effort we take needs to be scalable. And when I say scalable, it goes much more beyond that we launch a library or we launch an application or that we talk to a community member. We are talking about embracing the earth, the world, and the system as we know it today. We need to take a global approach to ecosystem growth. We cannot just focus on one use case or one country because it's extremely hyped now. We need to be inclusive and focus on that the Cardano protocol fits for the entire human society. This sets us apart from for-profit entities who focus on geographical market development, and it sets us apart from enterprises and other organizations who's very narrow focused on a product to market fit. This is an infrastructure play, a global infrastructure play around 1 billion users on the Cardano protocol. But this could sound a little bit high level still. So let's try and go down the funnel a bit and actually have a look at what that means. So being a bit more concrete, in the short term, we will do the following things. First of all, not only, as you've seen, we've launched the Cardano registry, but we are going to run that as a product. We already got a lot of very good feedback from the community about the adoption, about features and so forth. So we're going to put extra resources into that and run it as a product. So it goes into the Alonso era, but also go even further. I think one of the key blocks of the Cardano protocol is really the beauty it is that it merges between on-chain activity and off-chain activity. And that is one of the places where the Cardano registry has to live, in the off-chain part, compartmentalizing certain data sources and bringing that on-chain and having that user experience you get between your raw and Daedalus and the on-chain, for instance, for an NFT. We want to ensure that we build and operate a blockchain explorer. Now, why are we doing that? Well, first of all, we're doing that to increase the technical understanding within the foundation, ensure that our engineers are very close to the protocol which is being built by IRHK. But we're also doing that because we see that there's an institutional trust gap emerging right now. There's many enterprises from different sizes who says, oh, if I have to interact with a blockchain, does it really mean that I have to operate a node? Does it really mean that I have to have 10 or 15 blockchain engineers and so forth? And if I use some of the awesome tools you, dear community, have built, what about, compliance? What about counterparty, completeness? How do I know that you are available? How do I know the code is correct? How is there a phone number I can call? So we see that there is a gap around this transparency of the blockchain. We also see that the increased technical understanding and feedback loops, it always starts with the documentation. When we look into the enterprises and when we look into, many people who wishes to use the blockchain, they always come down to, how are we going to do it? What are we actually going to do? How are we actually going to upskill our teams? How can we read about it? How can we learn? So I think this part here, not just for the foundation and the close vicinity of our ecosystem, but for a much larger play around who is going to be the future users of the Cardano protocol. As an obvious consequence out of that is the creation of an educational program. Not just an educational program focusing on the lovely engineers and academics who really are looking into the source code and the math of this, but also one for solution engineers who are sitting in complex environments, whether that is nation states, NGOs, or enterprises, and looking at how can we actually optimize business enterprise architecture to get more out of it, to change the way corporations and governments are working. So these solution engineers will find themselves with a lovely educational program to ensure that they understand, when do we actually need to use blockchain? Where is it that Cardano makes a real impact? And how can they ensure in the environment they're sitting in, they can use our infrastructure to create a larger impact in the organization they're in? Many of you who's been following us for a while have seen we're growing what we call the Center of Excellence. I will get back to that in a couple of slides. But for the integrations, the business models, and the art of the possible, The Cardano Foundation might be able to do a lot in terms of transparency, community management and other things, but we need to show the art of the possible. What is really possible to do right now on this blockchain today? We are going to launch a developer portal sooner than later. I'm guessing in 1 to 2 weeks you will have the first beta version out there, and there you will find all of the information, including having the ability to talk to us and talk to other developers and really find out, what can we do on Plutos? What does Malawi do? What does all of these things do? How do I get from Java into to Plutos? So that's coming. It's going to be vibrant and it's going to be fantastic. As any other thing, when you start interacting with it, you probably has a couple of good ideas on how to improve it. So do ensure to send it our way. And then build the organization. We are only as strong as the team are. And the stronger a team we can get around the Cardano Foundation, the more we can augment out to the ambassadors, the stake pool operators, the node operators and so forth. And the stronger we can get out into the next layer of the users of the protocol, the people who build dApps and applications on top of it. And in the end users who actually get an effect out of a blockchain-enabled world. In that comes also our goal to create advisory boards, which will again increase the feedback loop, whether that is from a regulatory perspective, whether that is from an industry perspective, whether that is from a node operator perspective, or from a fifth perspective. But having this organized and structured feedback loops will allow us to put the focus in the right places, and let's not forget it, having fun with the right things to really create that impact and that growth and iteration we want to have in a decentralized protocol. Last but not least, the DCF white paper, as Charles has been speaking about many times, the decentralized consortium funding mechanism. We are writing a white paper around that, about how the future of governance and funding models can be in blockchain projects. Really looking back and thinking about what have we learned since the emergence of Bitcoin, and what can we take from these learnings and bring them not just into our project, but also into other projects, which might be built on top of our infrastructure or might be built in another siloed infrastructure. So this is the 8 points, very concretely we're going to focus on in the next 12 to 18 months. And we'll be looking very much forward as they kind of progress. As you can see, I already, kind of tick some boxes and say, how far are we and so forth. And I'm hoping that we can keep updating that and maybe give you even more transparency of what we do on a daily basis. Now, these 8 very tactical short-term goals, they will be the building blocks of how we will improve our infrastructure in the foundation to ensure that this long-term can lead to some very concrete longer-term goals. So when we look into 2022, it is not only important, it is vital for an ecosystem which is built around the native currency of ADA as a utility token, which allows you to operate on our blockchain, that wherever you are, if you're building a business model or if you're capturing business value from optimizing business procedures, or if you're building a security token or an NFT, or you are a fisherman in West Africa and you're building an identity. So whatever happens, how you integrate with us always comes over sometimes the ADA. Therefore, onboarding 50 banks becomes very important for us. It should be in a way that if you have a lot of ADA, you can always get into the local fiat currency. And you can always get from a local fiat currency into ADA and over time into whatever other token you might be holding using the Cardano blockchain. The other part about focusing on the banks will allow us downstream to push one of the most regulated industries, but also one of the industries who's most ripe for change, to basically get their eyes open for what they can do long-term using smart contracts and other features on the Cardano protocol. Plus, in their compliance function, it will allow them to take hard choices about, do we have the right auditability? Do we have the right forensic tools? Do we have the right identity coupled to the accounts? All of those things will push us to put the power in the right places to solve some of those problems, that ADA and other tokens become available in the countries you might be living in and might be operating from. We want to introduce at least 3 supportive libraries, tools and amazing use cases. The developer portal, of course, that's not just a static thing. It needs to be very vibrant, interactive, a place where developers comes, not only gets help, but also gets ideas and can share ideas. We want to increase the quality of voting and proposals in Catalyst. We already see we have about 200,000 users who is voting in Catalyst. I will pause 1 second. 200,000 voters who is voting in the decentralized treasury. That is de facto the largest government without a nation state in effect today. That is already an amazing milestone. But increasing this and increasing the meaningful participation will get us even further. And last but not least, increase the interoperability for financial inclusion. So how do we take some of the beautiful things from DeFi into a regulated space? How do we bridge the part that in certain countries digital money works with a mobile network operator, but not yet on a blockchain? How do we ensure that everybody who wants to can interact with our project and our blockchain applications? 2023 and 2024, we're talking about publishing at least 3 white papers and how-to case studies. We are talking about promoting the growth in wallet addresses, increase the diversity of on-chain activity. So how we think about it in the foundation is really like this. The more wallet addresses we're getting and the more on-chain activity we're getting is a counter to the banks. So we don't want to end up in a situation where the only way you can interact with a public and permissionless blockchain is through an intermediary. Then we are missing a lot of the innovation which has gone into this decentralized distributed network and production. Therefore, measuring the on-chain activity and the diversity of that. So in essence, how much are enterprises, individuals, and people who's building businesses willing to put on the blockchain in terms of different use cases and different value add? That becomes one of the main milestones of the Cardano Foundation. And so does the promotion of the wallet addresses, that we don't have anybody operating in an omnibus setup through a regulated institutional setup only, but we have a good mixture between bridging the old world and being in the new world, where a lot of things is becoming possible, and as regulation are changing, even more things in terms of innovation becomes available. On board, Fortune 500 companies holding ADA, using ADA, taking Cardano as a protocol, as an infrastructure into the engine room of these large multinational corporates will show them what it does mean to have real transparency and real immutability around data, and how to change the governance of these companies to optimize to what the shareholders really want and not just the next, earnings and the next quarterly yields. And last but not least, increase the interoperability for chains and world systems. Our ability as a foundation to bridge the Cardano protocol into the existing operating systems of the world will allow us to upgrade them and over time take over parts of those functions as they see the beauty and the functionality and the mathematical proof a blockchain can give you in real life. We are satisfied when, in 2026, we have a suite of services for a nation. That we have a truly decentralized protocol stack, which is self-evolving with the community. That we see Voltaire is coming into action, and we see that a lot of the decisions and the roadmap is being driven from the voting and the actual governance, which is happening from our community and the future users. We want to have an ongoing assistance on regulatory frameworks, which makes it easier to use decentralized protocols and blockchains. And obviously, we are on the road, as I said before, and I will continue saying, what does a blockchain look like when 1 billion users get the value proposition and get the impact of all of those things a blockchain can offer? Now, this is obviously a lot of very ambitious goals. And for ambitious goals, you need a battle plan and you need a battle space. So let me introduce you to our battle space. So, on the one side here we have the technical capabilities. The technical capabilities, as from start basically, has always been around IOHK, doing the academic part, the research and the engineering. Now, a lot of other companies have added on to that, and I think that is just marvelous, and I hope in the future there will be a multitude of companies lifting up the pure technical layer 1 blockchain node capabilities. On the other hand, the foundation, we belong down here. This is more the how, the institutional capabilities. Now, let me define institutional capabilities because it's a very loaded word. Institutional capabilities for us means the following. Everyone and every incorporation who accepts that they live in a society which has social norms and has social accountability and has a regulatory and legislative framework and has dependencies on other cities in close vicinity or other countries in close vicinity, that's what I call institutional. So this is a little bit of a wider term. I'm really increasing the Wikipedia definition of this. Now, in this journey towards decentralization and towards the Cardano nations, we see that specifically these enterprises, financial intermediaries and governments, they're asking for a couple of things. The first thing they're asking about is certainty. Certainty from a regulatory perspective that when they start using these blockchains, which is very new, let's remember we are very new on the maturity level, that they can do that without having a problem with their auditor, with the regulator, with any kind of supervisory authorities, and so forth. The other part which is important for them is obviously the education, that they understand when to apply these and deploy these protocols. When is it they can use it? And when they then start giving away the power of not owning their own infrastructure, but using a decentralized infrastructure, what becomes important is predictability, resilience, and reliability. That you can actually trust and know that when you put key and life critical procedures and applications on a blockchain, that you don't wake up next year and suddenly the blockchain has forked into different projects and the one you're using is not maintained anymore. That is resilient against cybersecurity attacks, that it does what it's supposed to do, that is auditable, it has a good description, and it has a continuously evolving description which matches the code. These things is extremely important for only a certain part of enterprises and governments. But it's nearly everybody. The bigger you become and the more accountable they become towards different authorities or towards the people working there, the more we see a demand for that. And that is exactly where the Cardano Foundation in the start couple of years can make a huge impact. We think about the ADA standard. We think about what can ADA do right now on the Cardano blockchain? Because as you know already now with native tokens, you actually will have the possibility of getting all of the benefits the ADA can do. So everything the ADA can do, you will be able to do with your tokens on the Cardano blockchain. So when we're looking at the ADA standard, we're really looking at it with the lens of if the ADA can do it right now, it's programmable finance, it must be able to fit into these retail, enterprise, and government organizations, and we must be able to de-risk their landscape from actually using that and going live with that. On the other side up here, we have what we call the Cardano standard. Cardano standard is, of course, when we finish Cardano 2020, and we will look into the future with Byron and Voltaire and Gauguin. What are we actually able to do there? And this is a totally new toolbox, which are able to have a much different scope. But as the Cardano Foundation is focusing on what is there right now, and not so much about what will be coming in the future, when we look at the adoption, we really focus on that. When we look at the legislation and regulation, we start moving up towards the Cardano standard, because we need to look 1 to 5 years ahead on how this regulation and these standards are being moved in the future. So this is how we look at our battle space. And obviously it's going to be a much more crowded as we see much more use cases and much more adoption coming into it. Internally, this means that we have a two-tiered approach. A green box and a blue box. So if I start here over at the green box with the Center of Excellence, what is really important is exploring the art of the possible. What can actually be done on this beautiful technology stack right now, right here, to touch the heart and the souls of the people and increase the amount of people who can get access to an architecture, to a system who is looking so much like one in the developed countries have access to. Integration, support key infrastructure, and large market participants. So what is these for a few use cases where we can actually do a stamp right now and we can help them to come on board, to have a signpost or a major integration which supports everybody to get a better market infrastructure and to build even more use cases and even more adoption. Testing new business models on the Cardano with enterprises and moving into the funneling of reaching and coordinating large numbers. So we think about it as over here is a lot about hand-holding, it's about showing the art of the possible, it's about spearheading Cardano. And when we go over here, it's about the narrative of how do we reach 1 billion users. How do we use the economics of scale? How do we use technology? How do we use the community? How do we actually get to a place that we cannot answer all the emails and all of the phone calls? So self-service, snowball effects, all of that. That's coming over here. So generating the greater demand for Cardano is, as you can see, is nearly 50% of the business case for the Cardano Foundation. It's about enabling that more than it is about doing marketing. This creates a feedback loop. So when we see the large trends which is happening over here, these trends are being extrapolated over here, and we start picking the right people to handhold, the right use cases to ensure that it really shows what's possible and that we get the trends right, that we get the larger snowball effect rolling, and we also get some decentralization in terms of geographical and industry usage. So you might ask yourself, how does these two actually on a daily basis connect with each other? Now, obviously it is not two boxes, it's more like two different areas. So what we've seen, for instance, in Africa is that there's a lot of issues around identity, around creating an identity, around birth certificates and so forth. But what we also see is that a lot of NGOs have problems about the cost of transparency, about infrastructure and payment rails. So when they are operating in a crisis zone, how do they get to a point where they can actually route aid over digital means to the outskirts of the countries? So by working with some of these NGOs over here in the market and growth department, it became very clear that the cost of transparency is something we can explore on the blockchain today with the amount of metadata we have access to, the native tokens, but also the access to these payment rails. So how we can ensure identity. So when you want to do a small transaction from an NGO to a specific farmer or to a specific person who has the need for aid right now but don't have a bank account, how we can ensure that actually is happening in a compliant way, but also in a way which is transparent enough and doesn't increase the cost, so we get sufficient money into the actual use case without actually paying too much for transparency. So this is one of those things where we see that the trend is being established over in the market and growth is moving into the center of excellence, and the solutions are then moving back, and then obviously it's going to be open sourced, and everybody can then capture that and then use that in their local problem field and in their local countries. Now, we don't do that alone. So here's how we interact with various communities. We've divided it up like thinking about that researchers and engineers are different. Custodial responsibilities is of the blueprint who ensures that the documentation is up to date for the security and the technical audit. So we have a couple of communities, or we're thinking about how do we split the community, that we communicate, interact, and support and augment our community in different ways. Therefore, we see one part which is very much around these regulatory standards. It's about regulatory outreach, it's about transparency from a more like an established system perspective and how that bridges into blockchain. We have, of course, the stake pool operators, the node operators, the ADA performance of that. We have some industries which is more mature than other on this roadmap. We have the existing community and all of the fantastic use cases and startups which is coming on board right now. And then we have the engineering and how does Cardano 2025 is going to look like. So going forward, we're going to think way more in a direction of, these 5 topics. holds different ways we need to support, augment, and interact with in our already existing and future community to ensure that they get what they need from the toolbox and from the Cardano Foundation to really flourish. And we get from them what we need in terms of how do we prioritize our efforts in the right way to ensure that the 30 people and the funds we have goes the furthest in terms of the long-term adoption. In summary, you can think about it like that. The job who has to be done is that the Cardano Foundation's goal is to de-risk decentralization for regulators and organizations, empowering Cardano to deliver tangible impact by serving initiatives and mission-critical applications across a wide spectrum of market segments. That's a whole mouthful, but what it essentially means is that we build bridges, we will be a custodian, we will explain what's needed, and we will hold hands as other people are embarking on the blockchain journey with us. Now, updated plans means growing the team. We at the Cardano Foundation are made up of a team of skilled staff and contractors who are dedicated to pool their talents to help the foundation reach their goals. That means that we are also changing our organization. So this is our organizational chart, our target organizational chart. And as you can see here, I already spoke about these advisory boards we want to establish. So this is coming into the next 12 to 18 months. We have the council, and then we have the executive and departments and clusters. For those of you who've been working with us for a long time, you see some of those clusters, like for instance, security experts and so forth. It's not something we have today. And even though we very soon are going to launch a bug bounty program, it does mean that we need to have security experts in the Cardano Foundation to ensure either if we build our own applications or infrastructure connectors, or if we are looking at the accountability of others who's been built, that we can help guide that process and hold the hands. We at the Cardano Foundation are made up of a team of skilled staff and contractors who are dedicated to pool their talents to help the foundation reach their goals. So let me show you a couple of the new hires and the new joiners in our team who's already walking the path of the strategy which I've just described for you. First, Kristen Groom, a growth hacker. She's based in Vancouver and she has over 5 years experience in digital and growth marketing. And as you've probably seen already on Twitter and other channels, her work is excellent. She really works wonders, improving our messaging and expanding the reach of our channels. Then we have Clark, based in the Philippines. He's our code poet. He's been working very hard on the developer portal and some of our front-end part, like the web page. And it's kind of, I wouldn't say it's funny, but what I really love about Clark is he's very entrepreneurial. So I think he always lives in zeros and ones. He always lives in code and has a lot of good experience in user experience and how you actually get this computer to human interface and machine to human interface rocking. Then we have Sydney. Sydney is our relevance wizard. So he's based in Bossum in Holland and he's a creative director. And what is really important about code, about math and those things is really simple. How do we bring that message over so everybody understands it? How do we get the messages in that people can smell the code, that people can listen to the code, that people can see the differences without actually being able to read code? And he's doing a lot of the hard work there. We have Jennifer. Jennifer is our project juggler. We would like to be in a place in the future that we can run 30 cross-functional projects at any given time. And to do that, we need to have a project management office which looks at the economics of scale of how we run projects, very complex projects in the intersection between humans, technology, and business models. Then there's David, based out of the UK. He's our impact orchestrator. He's been working very deeply in the fintech space, knows a lot about systems and scalability, economics of scale. Last but not least, we have Kevin Sislak, our wordsmith. He's really playing around how do we actually get all of those articulated, how do we write it out, how do we present it, how do we get a different face out into our written word. But We are on the lookout for amazing staff and contributors to the Cardano Foundation. It is some very ambitious goals we set forward. We deserve to play this chance of really changing the world to a better place. Therefore, if I have one last cry out, it is that if you are here for the first time and you think that it resonates what I just said, if you are an ambitioned community member, or if you're in crypto and blockchain, please have a look at the following profiles. We are actively looking for a head of business hacking. We're looking for 2 technical writers. We're looking for a copywriter. We're looking for an art director. We're looking for a PR manager, an operational manager, a head of finance. So it's really a lot of roles which is open right now at the moment. And the earlier we can get the right people into the right roles, the more traction we can do. Now, if you have any questions, if you want to reach out, if you want to look about our job vacancies, this is the best place to go. For job vacancies, the Cardano Foundation's webpage. For general chat and trends and what's going on, I think a very good place is the t.me/Cardano. Developer resources, very soon we will have our developer portal and it will be available through the developers.cardano.org. This is already populated a bit, but you see big changes to come here in the start of July. For deeper discussions about everything from game theory to code to architecture to use cases and business models, we have a very lively forum and many discussions. I know a lot of the staff from the Cardano Foundation is actively in there and is a good place to reach out to us. It's a place we moderate and we are very deeply involved in. And last but not least, our Twitter channel @Cardano Stiftung. That leaves with not much more to say than thank you for your time. And remember, Cardano, we need to enable the architects of the future, not the victims. So keep building, and the future is already here. Thank you.